Hey guys, tonight we're lacing up a pair of well-worn rental shoes and stepping back into a place that once glowed on the edge of nearly every American town. A long, low building with a neon sign humming in the dusk, a parking lot full of station wagons, and a set of glass doors that opened onto the warmest, brightest, noisiest room you knew. We're talking about the bowling alley and the way it quietly became the beating heart of family life in 1960s America. Before we settle in, a soft thank you to the listener who suggested this one. You wrote in about the sound of pins falling and the smell of the snack bar on a Friday night, and it stayed with me for weeks. So much of what we make here comes straight from the memories you share, and I am always grateful for it. If you enjoy these quiet trips backward, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe, only if it feels right to you, and to leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what the weather is doing outside your window tonight. And if you would rather drift off with your eyes closed, the channel is now on Spotify as well. The link is down in the description whenever you want it. Now go ahead and get comfortable. Dim the lights until the room goes soft and golden. Switch on a fan for that low, steady hush. Pull the blanket up, find the cool side of the pillow, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been all day. Because I want you to wonder a few things with me. What did a bowling alley actually smell like when you walked in on a cold evening? That mix of lane oil, cigarette smoke, popcorn, and shoe polish. What did it feel like to slide your fingers into a ball that 100 strangers had rolled before you? What did families really talk about in those moulded plastic chairs, waiting for their turn under the long fluorescent lights? And why did a simple game of knocking down 10 pins become the one night of the week everyone looked forward to? And just like that, it is a Friday evening in 1962. The supper dishes are drying in the rack. Your father is jingling the car keys by the door. Somewhere across town the pin decks are already glowing, and the night is just beginning. Let us start in the driveway just after supper, when the light has gone soft and blue and the street lamps are beginning to buzz awake. You climb into the back of the station wagon, the vinyl seat still holding a little of the day's warmth, and the whole family piles in around you. Your father backs out slow, one arm draped over the seat, and the neighbourhood slides past the window in a familiar procession of porch lights and mowed lawns. There is a particular kind of anticipation in that drive, the knowledge that the whole evening is still ahead of you, unspent and full of promise. The wagon smells of the day itself, of the vinyl and the faint gasoline sweetness of the engine, and whatever supper still clings to your father's shirt sleeves. Your mother sits up front with her pocketbook on her lap, checking her lipstick in the little visor mirror by the last of the daylight. Your brother has claimed the window on the other side, and the two of you jockey without words for the middle armrest. A small territorial dispute settled by a look from the front seat. The radio murmurs low, a ball game or a crooner, or the weather for tomorrow, and none of you are really listening to it, because the sound is just part of the going. Out past the window, the town is settling into its evening. A man in his undershirt stands at the end of his drive, rolling the hose into neat loops. Two boys on bicycles cut across a lawn and vanish between the houses. The hardware store you pass has its lights off already, its awning rolled up for the night, and the diner on the corner glows warm and yellow, with a few late suppers still going. You know this route by heart. You could close your eyes and feel each turn coming, the long, slow curve past the school, the stop where the crossing guard stands in the mornings, the little rise in the road that lifts your stomach for just a second if your father takes it a touch too fast. There is talk in the car, but it is the easy kind, the kind that does not require much. Your father asks whether anyone remembered the score sheet from last week, and no one has, and it does not matter. Your mother wonders aloud whether the Hendersons will be there tonight, whether that woman ever did get her sister moved out to the coast. Your brother wants to know if he can have a cola tonight and a bag of chips, both, and the answer comes back as a maybe that everyone at this point understands to mean yes. These were conversations without any weight to them, and that was exactly their gift. There was nowhere else to be. There was nothing waiting to interrupt. You press your forehead to the cool glass and watch the sky do its slow work of going dark. The blue deepens toward the horizon, and the first real streetlights flicker and hold, and the houses turn from daytime houses into nighttime houses, each window a small lit stage where some other family is finishing its own supper. You wonder, the way children do, what those families are doing, whether any of them are climbing into their own wagons tonight, whether you will see them under the same bright lights in 20 minutes' time, and more often than not, you will. Then your father says, "There it is," and you all lean toward the same window at once. Up ahead, past the gas station and the shuttered furniture store, the sign rises out of the gathering dark, tall and humming and impossibly bright, its neon letters buzzing to life one flicker at a time. A great arrow points down toward the low wide building, and the parking lot beneath it is already half full of station wagons and sedans nosed in at their careful angles. The whole place glows against the night like something dropped there from a happier planet, and your heart does the small quick lift it always does at the first sight of it. Your father swings the wagon into the lot and rolls slow between the rows, hunting a space near the doors, and you can already feel the evening pulling at you through the glass. The parking lot has its own life, families climbing out of their cars, fathers carrying ball bags, children breaking into a run and being called back. Someone waves, someone hollers a greeting across 3 parked cars. The doors of the alley open and close, and each time they do, a little burst of that thunder and light escapes out into the dark before the doors seal it away again. He finds a spot at last and cuts the engine, and for one held moment the car goes quiet and still, the ticking of the cooling motor the only sound. Then the doors open all at once and the cold evening air rushes in, and you are out and standing on the asphalt, and the whole family gathers itself together the way families do, your mother smoothing your collar, your father locking up, your brother already 3 steps ahead. You walk toward the glowing doors as a small unit, and the sound grows louder with every step, and the light spills out to meet you across the pavement. It is the kind of arriving that is harder to come by now, when the whole family piled into one car and drove toward one bright place together, and the evening had not yet begun, and every good part of it was still waiting just past those doors. Now you are pushing through the heavy glass doors, and the room hits you all at once. It is the sound first, that rolling thunder of balls down 40 lanes at once, and then the sharp scattering crack of pins, over and over from every direction. The light is bright and even and endless, humming down from long banks of fluorescence, and the smell wraps around you before you have taken 3 steps. Oil and smoke and buttered popcorn and something faintly sweet from the snack bar. It is a room that feels alive in a way that is harder to find now. You stand there for a moment just inside the doors, letting it wash over you, the way you might pause at the top of a hill before running down. The ceiling stretches away farther than seems possible, low and long and lined with those humming lights, and beneath it the lanes run out in their gleaming parallel rows, 40 ribbons of polished maple all pointing toward the same distant wall of crashing pins. There is so much happening at once that your eyes do not know where to land. A ball curves into the pocket down at lane 12 and the pins explode. A man throws his arms up at lane 30. A little girl in a red dress runs the length of the ball return with her mother calling after her. The warmth of the place folds around you next, a close human warmth made of bodies and machines and the heat of all those lights. After the cold blue of the parking lot, it feels like stepping into someone's kitchen on baking day. You unzip your jacket without thinking, and your brother is already tugging his off and bundling it under one arm, and your mother is scanning the far lanes to see who has come tonight and whether your usual spot is free. Your father raises a hand to someone across the room, a slow, easy wave, and a voice hollers his name back through the din, and just like that you have been seen, you have arrived, you belong here. The floor beneath your shoes is a marvel all its own to a child, that swirling terrazzo speckled with 1,000 colours, cool and smooth and endless, worn to a soft shine down the main aisle by decades of feet. You could look at it for an hour. The grown-ups walk right across it toward the counter, but you dawdle, reading the terrain, cataloguing every wonder. There, the great glowing wall of the snack bar. There, the jukebox pulsing red in its corner. There, the racks and racks of balls in their marbled colours, and beyond them the lanes, and beyond the lanes the pins standing white and patient in their perfect triangles, waiting to be knocked flat. The sound never lets up, and that is part of what makes it feel so alive. It is not one noise, but 100 noises braided together. The low, continuous rumble of the balls rolling, the bright crack of the strikes, the mechanical whir and clank of the pinsetters resetting, the ring of the cash register, the murmur and laughter of 1,000 conversations happening at once. Somewhere a child is crying, and somewhere a whole league table is roaring at a spare, and the jukebox rides over the top of all of it with a song you half know. You would think it would be too much. Somehow it is not. Somehow it settles into you as one great comfortable din, the sound of everyone in town being happy in the same room at the same time. You breathe it in, and the smell tells you the rest of the story. Under everything is the oil, that faint, clean chemical sweetness of the dressing they lay down on the lanes, a smell you will know instantly for the rest of your life and never quite be able to name for anyone who did not grow up with it. Layered over it is the cigarette smoke drifting in slow blue ribbons beneath the lights, and the coffee going bitter and dark at the snack counter, and the popcorn turning gold behind its glass, and the hot dogs rolling on their chrome rollers. It is not a clean smell, not by the standards we keep now, but it is a warm one, and a full one, and it means Friday night the way nothing else ever will. For a moment you simply stand in the middle of it, a small person in a very large and very bright room, and you feel the particular happiness of being here again. There is a whole evening ahead of you, and every good part of it is inside this building waiting, the shoes to be traded, the ball to be chosen, the turn to come and the pins to fall, the cola and the fries and the sleepy drive home hours from now. All of it is still ahead, and you are standing right at the front edge of it with your jacket over your arm. Your mother's hand finds your shoulder and steers you gently forward, toward the counter, toward the shoes, toward the start of it all. You go, but you go slowly, still drinking it in. Rooms like this were built to hold a whole town at once, and they did it without effort, gathering families in out of the dark and folding them into the light and the warmth and the noise. It is the kind of welcome that is harder to find now, when so much of what we do alone and quietly, and it is worth sitting with the memory of a place that opened its bright doors and simply let everyone in. It is time for the shoes now, and there is a small ceremony to it. You step up to the counter, tell the man your size, and watch him turn and pluck a pair from the great sloping wall of cubbies behind him, each shoe stamped with its number in bold. He slides them across, red and cream or blue and cream, still faintly warm and smelling of disinfectant and 1,000 earlier feet. You hand over your own shoes in trade, a small act of trust, and carry the rentals back to your lane feeling somehow more official, more ready. The counter itself sits low enough that even you can rest your elbows on it and peer over the edge at the man's work. He is a fixture of the place, this counterman, in his short-sleeved shirt with the alley's name embroidered over the pocket, a pencil tucked behind one ear, and a manner that is brisk, without ever being unkind. He has done this 10,000 times. He knows the sizes by the shape of a foot before you finish saying the number, and his hand goes straight to the right cubby without his eyes ever seeming to search. To a child, he seems to command that whole towering wall of shoes the way a librarian commands the stacks, keeper of a system too vast to be understood from the outside. There is a moment of quiet negotiation over your size, because your feet are between numbers, growing the way children's feet do, and your mother leans in to have her say. Better a touch large than a touch small, she tells the man, and he nods as though she has spoken great wisdom, and he swaps the pair for the next size up. You do not much care about the fit. You care about the colour and the number stamped bold on the heel, and you care most of all about the strange and wonderful fact that these shoes are not yours, that they has been worn by strangers whose names you will never know, and that in an hour you will hand them back and someone else will lace them up. You take your own shoes off right there, wobbling with one hand on the counter, and there is always something a little vulnerable in it, standing in your socks on that cool speckled floor in the middle of the bright loud room. You set your ordinary school shoes up on the counter and slide them across, and the man takes them without ceremony and sets them in the empty cubby your rentals came from. And just like that, a piece of your outside life has been checked at the door. You will not be entirely yourself again until you get them back. For the length of the evening you are someone else, someone in bowling shoes, someone who has crossed over into the world of the lanes. The rentals themselves are curious objects, worn soft and creased across the toes, the leather gone supple from countless feet before yours. They are two-toned in that particular way no ordinary shoe ever is, and the soles are strange and slick, meant for sliding on the approach rather than gripping the ground, so that your first few steps in them feel faintly like walking on ice. You test them out right there, sliding one foot forward experimentally, and your brother does the same beside you, the two of you skating a little on the smooth floor until your mother tells you to quit before you crack your heads open. You sit on the low bench by your lane to lace them, bent over your knees, working the frayed laces through the eyelets, and the smell of them rises up close, that clean, sharp disinfectant smell that could not fully cover the older, warmer smell underneath. It ought to have bothered you, sharing shoes with strangers, and somehow it never did. It was simply how the night worked. Everyone did it. Your father did it, and your mother did it. The league men in their fine team shirts did it. The pretty teenagers on their dates did it. There was a kind of easy democracy to it, the whole town passing the same shoes back and forth, no one above it, no one making a fuss. Laced up at last, you stand and take a few real steps, and there is a small transformation in it. You walk differently in bowling shoes. You feel the slide in them, the readiness, and you begin, without quite knowing it, to carry yourself like someone about to play. Your brother clomps ahead of you toward the ball rack, and you follow, testing the slick soles against the floor, and the game has not even started, but already you feel yourself becoming part of it. Later, at the end of the night, you will do the whole ritual in reverse. You will unlace the rentals with tired fingers and hand them back across the counter and receive your own shoes in return, warm from sitting in the cubby, and you will lace them on and feel yourself return to ordinary life, ready for the cold car and the drive home and your own bed. It was such a small thing, that trading of the shoes, and yet it marked the crossing so perfectly, in and then back out again. It is the kind of ritual we have mostly let go of now, the little shared ceremonies that told you an evening had truly begun, and there is something worth honouring in a place that made even the changing of your shoes feel like the start of something good. Now comes the choosing of the ball, which for a child is nearly the whole point of the evening. You walk the length of the return rack, running your palm over the cool marbled surfaces, the swirls of red and green and deep midnight black. You're searching for the one that fits, the one whose finger holes are not too wide and not too snug, whose weight your small arm can actually swing. Your mother reminds you not to drop it on your toes, and you nod without really hearing her, already lost in the important work of finding the ball that is yours for the night. The house balls sit racked in their long curving rows, dozens of them, and each one is a small world unto itself. Some are a solid deep colour, black or maroon, or a bottle green so dark it is nearly black, and these have a serious grown-up look to them that draws your brother straight in. But the ones that hold you are the marbled ones, swirled through with paler veins like polished stone, like something dredged up from the bottom of a river and shined to a gloss. You turn them where they sit, just to watch the light move across the swirls. You're in no hurry. The choosing is half the fun, and you mean to do it properly. Weight is the real problem, and you know it even as you fall in love with the heavy ones. There is a temptation to choose a ball too big for you, to prove something, and every child gives in to it at least once, and pays for it with a throw that lands with a graceless thud, barely past the foul line, and wanders drunkenly into the gutter. So, you have learned, a little, to be honest with yourself. You lift a few, testing them against your arm, feeling how they pull at your wrist and shoulder. Too heavy, and you cannot swing it. Too light, and it feels like a toy and rolls too slow to knock down much of anything. Somewhere in the middle is the one that is right, and finding it is a matter of patience and a fair amount of trial. Then there are the finger holes, drilled for hands of every size, and matching them to your own small fingers is its own careful science. You slide your thumb into one hole and your two fingers into the others, and you can tell in an instant whether it is wrong, too wide so the ball threatens to slip off entirely, or too narrow so your fingers stick and pinch. Your father shows you how to check it, how the fit should be snug but easy, how you should be able to draw your fingers out clean and quick at the moment of release. You try a dozen before you find the one that answers, and when you do, you feel it, a small rightness, the ball settling into your hand as though it had been waiting there. The ball return itself is a wonder while you wait for your turn. That low humming machine that swallows the balls at the far end and delivers them back to you, as if by magic, rising up out of the mouth of the rack with a rumble and a soft mechanical clunk. You learn quickly not to rest your fingers where the balls come through. After one good pinch teaches you the lesson for life. But you love to stand by it anyway, waiting, watching the balls come rolling back up the track from the pins, still spinning a little, warm from their travels, and you love the moment of reaching in to lift out your own from among the others, knowing it by its swirl. Your chosen ball becomes yours for the whole evening, and you guard it with a quiet possessiveness. When it comes back up the return, you claim it before your brother can, and you set it apart on the rack in its own spot, and you would no more bowl with a different ball halfway through the game than you would trade your own name. It is a small ownership, borrowed and temporary, handed back at the end of the night to sit in the rack for the next child. But for these 2 hours it is yours, and there is a real attachment in it, the way children can pour their whole hearts into things that do not truly belong to them. You lug it back to your lane, cradled against your stomach with both arms, because that is the only safe way to carry a thing so heavy, and you set it down with care, and you take your place in the family's rotation. The ball waits there for you now, gleaming under the lights, its swirls catching and throwing the brightness back. You have chosen well. You're certain of it. This is the ball that is going to knock them all down tonight, and even if it does not, the certainty is its own kind of joy. There was a simple happiness in that choosing, in taking your time over a rack of borrowed balls until you found the one that felt like yours, and it is the kind of small, unhurried pleasure that is easy to overlook and easy to lose. It is worth remembering how much a child could care about getting a thing exactly right, back when there was all the time in the world to stand at the rack and choose. Let us settle in at the lane itself now, that gleaming ribbon of maple stretching away from you toward the pins. You stand at the top of the approach, and an older cousin or an uncle shows you how it is done, 4 steady steps and a smooth swing, the ball leaving your hand with a heavy rolling thud. It travels away from you impossibly slow, and the whole family goes quiet watching it, everyone leaning the same way as if they could steer it with their bodies. There is something wonderful about how much a household could care about the fate of a single rolling ball. The lane up close is longer than it ever looked from the benches, a vast polished plain of narrow wooden boards running away from your feet toward the distant white pins. You stand at the line where the approach meets the lane proper, that faint dark seam you have been warned 100 times never to cross with your foot, and you peer down its length, and it seems to stretch on forever. The pins at the far end look very small and very far away, and the gutters run alongside like 2 dark rivers, waiting to swallow anything that strays, which for a beginner is very nearly everything. Your uncle crouches down to your level, or your father, or whichever grown-up has taken you under his wing tonight, and he walks you through it slow. "Hold the ball up here," he says, cradled in both hands near your chest. "Line up your shoulder with the pins. Then it is 4 steps," he tells you. Right, left, or however it goes for your particular feet, and on the last step you let your arms swing down and back and forward again like a pendulum, smooth and easy, and you let the ball go just as it reaches the bottom, low and gentle so it rolls rather than drops. He makes it look effortless when he shows you, one long fluid motion ending with the ball whispering onto the wood. You try it, and of course it is nothing like his. Your steps come out jumbled, too many or too few, and you arrive at the line in a heap with the ball still clutched to your chest, or you release it too soon, and it lands with a bang halfway down the approach, or you hang on a beat too long and it thuds down just past your own toes. The grown-ups do not laugh, or they laugh the good way, the way that is on your side, and your uncle resets you at the top and says, "Try it again, slower this time," and you do. It takes many turns before anything like a real roll comes out of you, but the alley is patient, and so is your family, and each attempt is its own small adventure. And then, once in a while, it happens. The steps line up, the swing comes down smooth, the ball leaves your fingers clean and low and begins to roll, truly roll, straight down the boards toward the pins, and the whole family goes still. This is the wonderful part, the waiting, the ball travelling away from you so slowly that there is time for everyone to hope. Your mother leans, your brother leans, your uncle murmurs, come on," under his breath, and you find that you are leaning too, the whole lot of you tilted in the same direction as though your bodies together might nudge the ball toward the centre. It rolls and rolls, and the outcome hangs there unknowable for what feels like a small eternity. And then the ball reaches the pins, and there is a crack and a scatter and a clatter of falling wood, and the family erupts, whatever the result, because you rolled it true, and that is enough. Maybe it drifts at the last and clips only a pin or two at the edge. Maybe, gloriously, it finds the pocket and half the rack goes down in a heap. Either way, hands come down on your shoulders and someone says "nice one," and you turn back grinning, already wanting your next turn. There is a lesson buried in those first clumsy rolls, though no one calls it that. You learn that a good throw comes from being smooth rather than strong, from letting the ball go at the right moment rather than hurling it with all your might. You learn to take your time on the approach, to let the swing do the work, and you learn it not from a book or a coach, but from an uncle crouched at your level in a loud, bright room, teaching you the way things had always been taught, hand to hand, one patient turn after another. It is a rare and lovely thing, when you think back on it, how completely a family could invest itself in a child's slow roll down a wooden lane, how a whole household would lean and hope and cheer over 10 pins. That kind of shared attention is not so easy to come by now, and it is worth holding on to the memory of a place where the fate of a single rolling ball could, for a few seconds, matter to everyone you loved. Watch closely now, because just past the pins something remarkable is happening. The great metal arm of the automatic pinsetter descends, sweeps away the fallen pins, and lowers a fresh rack into perfect formation, all on its own. Only a few years earlier there would have been a boy crouched back there in the shadows, setting each pin by hand and dodging the flying wood. Now the machine does it tirelessly, lane after lane, and to a child in 1962 it looks like something close to magic. It was, in its quiet way, the invention that made this whole night possible. You could watch it all evening and never tire of it. When your ball reaches the end of the lane and knocks the pin sprawling, there is a pause, a held breath, and then the machinery wakes. A great bar comes sweeping down out of the darkness above the pin deck and rakes the fallen pins away, clearing the whole cluttered scene in one clean pass. Then, from up inside the housing where you cannot quite see, a device descends carrying the pins already cradled in their proper places, and it sets them down gently onto the deck, 10 of them at once, standing them in their flawless triangle with a precision no human hand could match at that speed. The bar lifts away, the deck is clear and perfect again, and the whole thing has taken only a few seconds. To grown-ups it was a convenience, a marvel they had already grown used to. But to a child it was pure wizardry, a machine that seemed to think, to know exactly which pins had fallen and which still stood, to sweep and reset and ready itself for the next roll without a single person laying a hand on it. You would crane your neck to see up into the shadowy works at the back of the lane, trying to catch a glimpse of the mechanism, and all you could make out was a suggestion of moving metal and the flash of the pins descending. It kept its secrets. That only made it more wonderful. What you could not have known at your age was how recent this magic truly was and what it had replaced. Not so many years before, behind each and every lane, there had crouched a boy, a pin boy, perched up on a little ledge above the pit where the pins and balls came flying. When a ball crashed through the pins, he would drop down, clear away the fallen wood, gather the pins and set them back by hand in their spots, then hoist himself up out of the way before the next ball came thundering down. He did it fast, faster than seemed possible, lane after lane, hour after hour, for a few coins a game and the constant risk of a flying pin catching him in the shin or the head. That world had vanished almost overnight when the automatic machines came in, and by the time you're standing here in 1962 watching the metal arm do its tireless work, the pin boys are already a story the older men tell, a piece of the recent past that the machine has quietly swept away along with the fallen pins. There is nobody back there in the shadows anymore, just the machine, patient and untiring, resetting the deck for the 10,000th time that day and ready to do it 10,000 more. And it is the machine, more than anything, that has made this whole bright evening possible. Because a bowling alley that needed a boy crouched behind every single lane could only ever be so large, could only run so many games, could only welcome so many families at once. But an alley where the machines set the pins could stretch to 40 lanes under one long roof, could keep them all running at once from open to close, could bring in whole leagues and birthday parties and Friday night crowds by the hundreds. The automatic pin setter did not just spare the pin boys their bruised shins. It turned bowling from a modest pastime into the great shared institution it became, the place where a whole town could gather on the same night. So you watch it, this humble, tireless machine, and you do not know any of that history, and it does not matter. You only know that it is astonishing, that a thing made of metal can reach into the wreckage of your throw and make everything perfect and new again in the space of a breath. You wait for it every single frame. You knock the pins down just to see the arm come sweeping out of the dark and set them right. It is a strange kind of tenderness looking back, to feel grateful for a machine, but that is what it earns. It stood in the shadows doing patient, unglamorous work so that families could gather in the light, and it asked for no thanks and got none. There is something worth honouring in the quiet inventions that made our best nights possible, the ones we never thought about because they simply worked, resetting the pins again and again so the game could go on. Now let us talk about the scoring, because in these years it is done entirely by hand. Someone in the family is appointed scorekeeper, usually the one who is best with numbers, and they hunch over the little table with a stubby pencil and a printed score sheet lit from below. There is a real skill to it, the marking of strikes and spares, the running of the frames, the arithmetic that has to keep pace with the game. You learn your addition at that table without ever calling it homework, and the pride of catching an error the grown-ups missed is a pride you carry home with you. The scorer's table sits just behind the lane, a little curved desk with a frosted glass top lit warmly from beneath, so that the score sheet laid upon it glows like a small stage. The pencils are always stubby, chewed at the ends, worn down to a couple of inches by 100 earlier games, kept in a little cup or rolling loose on the table. The sheets themselves are printed with rows of frames, 10 across, each frame a small box with the smaller box tucked in its upper corner where the marks of the strikes and spares go. To a newcomer it looks like a code, and in a way it is, a shorthand that everyone who bowls simply knows. The chosen scorekeeper takes the job seriously, whoever it is, an aunt with a head for figures or an older brother proud to be trusted with it, or your father himself when the game matters. They lean over the glowing glass with the little pencil and enter each throw as it happens, the number of pins knocked down, and then the running total that has to be worked out fresh after every frame. And it is not simple arithmetic, because a strike or a spare is not worth a plain 10. A spare earns you 10 plus whatever you knock down on your very next ball, and a strike earns you 10 plus your next 2 balls, so that a good frame reaches forward into the future and cannot be totalled until those next throws have happened. The scorekeeper has to hold all of that in their head, has to remember to circle back and fill in the earlier frames once the following throws come in. You watch this happen with real fascination. The way the pencil moves, the little diagonal slash that means a spare, the X that means a strike, the way whole frames sit blank and waiting until the scorer can loop back and complete them. You start to understand the language of it. You learn that the X is the best thing that can appear on the sheet, that a string of them running across the frames is what everyone is chasing, that a game climbing toward 200 is a game to be proud of. And slowly, turn by turn, you begin to do the sums yourself in your head, racing the scorekeeper, trying to have the new total ready before the pencil does. This was arithmetic, plain and simple, the same addition they drilled you on at school, but here it did not feel like schoolwork at all. Here it had a purpose you could see and care about. You wanted to know the score because the score was who was winning, and you wanted to check the scorekeeper's math because the family honour rode on it, and so you added and carried and totalled with a focus no worksheet ever pulled out of you. Children learn their numbers at that glowing table without once being told they were learning anything. They were simply keeping up with the game, and then came the finest moment of all, the one you lived for. Every so often, poring over the sheet, you would catch a mistake, a total that did not add up, a frame the scorekeeper had figured wrong. You would speak up, a little uncertain, and point at the box, and the grown-up would frown and recount and find that you were right. There was no pride in childhood quite like it, correcting an adult at their own math, and being thanked for it, and having your correction stand there on the sheet for the rest of the game. You carried that home. You lay in bed still glowing from it. It is a small thing that we have handed over to the machines now, that quiet handwork of the score, the pencil and the glowing glass and the sums worked fresh after every frame. The overhead screens that keep the tally for us are easier, and no one misses the arithmetic exactly. But something did go out of the evening when the pencil was set down, some small shared labour that gave a child a job and a purpose, and, now and then, the chance to be the one who caught what everyone else had missed. It is worth remembering how much good could come from doing a simple thing by hand together at a warm and glowing table. It is halfway through the game now and hunger has arrived, so let us drift over to the snack bar. The counter glows under its heat lamps, hot dogs turning slowly on their rollers, popcorn tumbling gold behind the glass. You order a cola that comes fizzing from the fountain in a wax paper cup, and maybe a paper boat of French fries to share with your brother. The whole treat costs your father only a little, and yet it feels like a feast, eaten with sticky fingers between turns while the pins keep crashing behind you. The snack bar is its own bright country at the far end of the building, a long counter with stools and a glowing menu board above it, everything lit warm and golden under the heat lamps. You can smell it from halfway across the room, the popcorn most of all, that rich buttery smell that seems to travel farther than any other, drawing children toward it the way it always has. Behind the counter, a woman in an apron works the fountain and the fryer and the register all at once, quick and unhurried, calling the orders back over her shoulder, and there is something maternal in her even to the stranger she serves. A plate slid across, a straw dropped in. There you go, honey. The menu is short and it is perfect. Hot dogs turning slow on their chrome rollers, glistening, waiting to be tucked into a soft white bun and painted with a stripe of yellow mustard. Popcorn tumbling gold in its lit glass case, scooped into striped paper bags or cardboard boxes. French fries coming up out of the fryer in a hot crackling rush, salted and heaped into little paper boats, and the fountain, the great gleaming fountain, where the colas and the root beers and the orange drinks come hissing out over ice into waxed paper cups, cold enough to fog the sides. There is not a health food in sight, and no one is looking for one. This is a treat, plain and glorious, and everyone understands it as such. Getting to order is a small event in itself. You've been eyeing the snack bar since you walked in, and somewhere around the 5th or 6th frame your father digs into his pocket and counts out a few coins into your palm and tells you and your brother to go on and get yourself something, and the two of you cross the room like you've been handed the keys to a kingdom. You debate the whole way, freeze or popcorn, cola or root beer, whether to pull your coins for something bigger to share or each get your own. These are weighty matters, deliberated with total seriousness, and half the pleasure of the treat is in the choosing of it. Then it is yours, carried carefully back toward the lanes, the cup cold and sweating in your hand, the paper boat of fries hot enough that you have to keep shifting your grip. You settle back into the bench in the rotation, and you eat between turns, which is its own particular joy. A fry here, a long pull of cola there, the game and the food braided together so that the taste of it is forever tangled up with the crash of the pins and the glow of the lights. Your fingers go salty and greasy. The cola fizzes against your nose. Your brother reaches into your fry boat and you swat his hand and share them anyway. And the wonder of it, looking back, was how little it all cost and how much it gave. A few coins from your father's pocket bought an evening's worth of small delights, a cola and a share of fries, and maybe a box of popcorn to pass down the row, and it felt like abundance. No one had to think hard about whether they could afford to feed the children a treat at the lanes. It was built into the price of the night, a small, easy pleasure that the whole family could reach without strain, and that easiness was part of its warmth. You lick the salt from your fingers and drain the last watery inch of cola from the bottom of the cup, and you feel entirely content, the good contentment of a child who is warm and fed and out for the evening with the people he loves. The snack bar had given you exactly what it was there to give. There is a particular tenderness in remembering food like that, simple and cheap and eaten with sticky, happy fingers in the middle of a loud, bright room. We are more careful now about what we eat and what we spend and what we let our children have, and there are good reasons for all of it. But it is worth sitting for a moment with the memory of a paper boat of fries and a fizzing cup of cola, and how completely they could make a child feel that the night was perfect. Let us step into the world of League Night now, which had a seriousness all its own. The regulars arrive in their team shirts, satiny and embroidered across the back with the name of a sponsor, the corner tavern or the auto garage or the hardware store. They carry their own balls in fitted bags, and they greet each other by name, and they mean business in a friendly, ribbing sort of way. To belong to a league was to belong to something, a small society that met at the same lanes on the same night every single week, faithfully for years. You could always tell League Night from an ordinary open evening the moment you walked in, because the crowd had a different bearing to it. These were not families out for a casual game. These were bowlers, and they carried themselves like it. They arrived in their team shirts, and those shirts were things of real beauty to a watching child, satiny and bright, in team colours, with a name stitched in flowing script across the back. The sponsor's name marked above or below it. The tavern down the block, the garage that fixed everyone's cars, the hardware store, the bakery, all the small businesses of the town lending their names to a bowling team and stitching a little of the community together in the process. They came with their own equipment too, which set them apart from the families lugging house balls off the rack. A league bowler had his own ball, drilled to fit his own hand exactly, carried in a fitted bag with a zippered pouch for his own shoes. He would set the bag down by the lane and unzip it and lift the ball out with the familiar care, and you understood, watching that this ball was a serious possession, chosen and cared for, nothing like the borrowed swirled thing you'd picked off the rack an hour earlier. There was a whole grown-up world of commitment implied in that bag, and you filed it away as something to aspire to. The greetings on league night had a warmth worn smooth by repetition. These men and women had been bowling beside and against each other for years, some of them on the same night every week, and they knew each other the way you know people you see faithfully over a long stretch of time. There were nicknames and running jokes, and the easy ribbing of people comfortable with one another. Somebody's poor score last week got brought up and laughed over. Somebody's new ball got admired and doubted in the same breath. It was competition, real competition, with standings that were tracked and mattered, but it was friendly down to its bones. The kind of rivalry that binds people closer rather than driving them apart. And there was ceremony to it, the way a league night unfolded. The teams took their assigned lanes, and there was a settling in, the changing of shoes, the wiping of the ball, the practice frames. Then the real games began, and the atmosphere sharpened, the focus came up, the good-natured needling quieted for the actual throws, and then burst out again at every strike and every gutter. A good frame drew a roar from the whole table. A costly miss drew groans and consolation, and a fair bit of mockery. Down the row, every team was living through the same small dramas at once, and the whole place hummed with the particular energy of people who cared about the outcome. What it gave these men and women beyond the game was belonging, plain and simple. To be on a team was to have a standing place in the world, a night that was yours and a group that expected you, a reason to be somewhere every single week with the same familiar faces. In a life that could otherwise narrow down to work and home and the long sameness of the days, the league was a reliable open door, a small society that met faithfully and counted you as one of its own. People kept these commitments for years, for decades even, showing up on the same night to the same lanes long after their scores had started to slip, because it was never really only about the scores. You watched all this from the edges, a child among the families, and you did not fully understand it, but you felt the pull of it. You wanted a shirt like that someday, with your name on the back and the name of some good local place stitched above it. You wanted to belong to something that met every week and knew you and expected you. That kind of faithful belonging is harder to come by now. The standing weekly gathering, the team that counts on you, the small society built around a simple shared game. We have traded a good deal of it for other things, most of them more convenient and lonelier both. And it is worth honouring the memory of those satin-shirted regulars who understood without ever saying it that the real prize of league night was never the trophy, but the faces that showed up beside you, week after week after week. Now here is something that mattered more than people often remember. Tuesday or Wednesday might belong to the Women's League, and for one evening a week your mother and her friends had a night that was entirely their own. They came in their good slacks and their bright cardigans. They laughed louder than they did at home, and they kept score and kept secrets and cheered one another on. In a decade when a woman's days were mostly measured out in the needs of others, that standing appointment at the lanes was a small and precious kind of freedom. You might have seen it only glancingly, if you saw it at all, because a women's league night was often a night the children stayed home. But sometimes you came along, tucked into the nursery or set loose near the snack bar, and from that vantage you got to watch your mother in a light you rarely saw her in. She was different here. At home she was always in motion, always tending, always one ear turned toward a child or a pot, or a knock at the door. Here, on this one night, the tending fell away, and something in her shoulders came down, and she laughed in a way you did not often hear inside your own kitchen. The women arrived dressed for themselves, in their good slacks and their bright cardigans, hair done, a little lipstick on, and there was a lift in all of them at simply being out. They greeted each other with a warmth that had years behind it, the same faces every week on the same night, and they fell into their own easy talk the moment they gathered. Talk that had nothing to do with anyone's husband or children except when they wanted it to. They kept their own score, ran their own standings, argued their own calls. For a few hours the whole apparatus of the lanes belonged to them, and they ran it entirely on their own terms, and they were good. That was the thing you might not have expected if you only ever thought of your mother as your mother. These women could bowl, some of them beautifully, with a practiced approach and a smooth swing, and a ball that found the pocket again and again. There were league averages that would have made the men take notice, and trophies in the case with women's names engraved on them, and a fierce, quiet pride in a well-earned strike. They were not playing at it. They were competing and winning and caring about the outcome, and there was something in a child to see his mother be excellent at a thing that had nothing to do with him at all. The talk between frames was its own world, and you understood even then that some of it was not for your ears. The women leaned their heads together over the scorer's table and traded the news of their lives, the small joys and the private worries, the things you tell friends who have known you a long time and will not repeat what they hear. There were secrets kept at that table, and comfort given, and advice traded low. A woman having a hard time at home found, on league night, a circle of others who understood without needing much explained. The bowling was real, but the friendship was the deeper thing, and the lanes were simply where it was allowed to happen. Because that was the quiet gift of it in that particular decade. A married woman's days were largely given over to others, measured out in meals and laundry and the endless needs of a household and a family, with precious little that was hers alone. The Women's League carved out one reliable evening that was exempt from all of it, a standing appointment that even the busiest home had to make room for, because it was written into the week. On that night she was not somebody's wife or somebody's mother first. She was herself among friends out for the evening, keeping score and keeping secrets and laughing loud under the bright lights. You may not have had the words for what you were seeing, watching your mother out there among her friends, but you felt that it was good, that something in her needed this and got it here, and you were glad for her without quite knowing why. We do not always remember to honour the small freedoms our mothers and grandmothers found where they could, in a world that gave them fewer than they deserved. But that one night at the lanes was such a freedom, real and weekly and hard won, and it is worth sitting with the image of those women in their bright cardigans, laughing louder than they did at home, claiming for a few hours a night that belonged entirely to them. Let us look now at the little ones, because the bowling alley made a place for them too. Many of the bigger centres kept a nursery, a bright room with a gate and a watchful attendant, where toddlers napped and played while their parents bowled a few lanes away. The older children roamed a bit freer, gathering by the vending machines, pressing their faces to the glass of the automatic pinsetters. It was a room built to hold whole families at once, from the babies to the grandparents, and it managed to hold them comfortably. The nursery sat off to one side, usually with a low gate across its doorway and a wide window so that a mother mid-frame could glance up and find her child in an instant. Inside it was a soft and padded little world, a scatter of blocks and worn picture books, a rocking horse with the paint rubbed off its handles, a corner of low cots for the ones who could still be coaxed to nap through the noise. The attendant was some patient woman who seemed to have an endless supply of calm, settling squabbles and wiping noses and keeping a dozen small children content while their parents bowled in peace a stone's throw away. It was a small marvel of arrangement when you think on it. This idea that a night out did not have to mean leaving the children behind, that the babies could come along and be looked after right there under the same roof while the grown-ups had their fun. A young mother could bowl her league games knowing her toddler was 20 steps away, safe behind the gate, and she could check on him between throws and hand him back a bottle and return to her lane with an easy mind. Whole families arrived together and stayed together, each age finding its own proper place within the building, and nobody was left out of the evening for being too small. The older children, the ones past the nursery but not yet old enough to bowl seriously, roamed the place in loose, happy packs. They were too big for the gated room and too little to hold a lane of their own, and so they made the whole alley their playground, orbiting between the wonders it offered. They clustered at the vending machines, pooling their coins, debating the merits of one candy against another, feeding in a nickel and watching the prize thunk down into the tray. They gathered at the ball, returned to watch the balls come rolling up out of the machine, and most of all they pressed their faces to the low glass down by the pins and watched the automatic pinsetters do their tireless magic, over and over, never tiring of it. There was a freedom to being a child in that room that would seem almost unimaginable now. Your parents were bowling, absorbed in their game, and you were simply loose in the building, trusted to stay out of trouble and turn up when it was your turn to throw. You wandered, you watched, you made temporary friends with the children from the next lane over, a friendship that might last only the length of an evening and be forgotten by morning, or might turn out to be a child you would see here every Friday for years. Nobody hovered, nobody worried much. The alley was a known place, full of neighbours, and a child within its walls was considered safe among them. And the beauty of it was how the whole span of a family fit inside those walls at once. In the nursery the babies, loose in the aisles, the roaming middle children, up at the lanes, the parents in the thick of their game, and often enough, settled on the benches with the coffee. The grandparents too come along to watch and cheer and hold a sleepy grandchild on a lap when the nursery grew too loud. 3 generations under one long roof on a single evening, each with a place that suited them, each part of the same gathering. There were not many places that could do that, then or now hold an entire family from the youngest to the oldest, and keep them all content at once. You belonged to that whole warm machine without ever thinking about it. You knew the nursery from your own younger years, and now you had graduated to the roaming pack, and someday you would graduate again to a lane of your own, and later, still you might sit on the bench with a coffee and watch your own grandchildren press their faces to the pinsetter glass. The building held all of it, all the ages of a life, and it held them gently. It is a rare thing, a place that makes room for everyone, that does not quietly ask the children to be elsewhere or the old people to stay home. The bowling alley made room for all of them, the napping babies and the roaming packs and the grandparents on the bench, and it folded them into one loud, bright evening without any strain at all. That kind of easy, whole-family welcome is harder to find now, and it is worth remembering a place that opened its doors to every age at once and simply let a family be a family, together, under one roof. Breathe in now, because the air of the place tells its own story. A blue haze of cigarette smoke hangs beneath the lights, drifting in slow ribbons, and nearly every adult has a cigarette going between frames, balanced in the groove of a chrome ashtray. To a child, it is simply the smell of the grown-up world, mixed with coffee and beer and lane oil into something that means Friday night. It is a scene no bowling alley would allow today, and remembering it now carries that gentle ache of a world that has quietly moved on. You did not think anything of it then, because it was simply the air you breathed, the air everywhere breathed. The haze hung up near the ceiling, caught in the beams of the long fluorescent lights, drifting and coiling in slow blue ribbons that shifted whenever a door opened somewhere and let in a breath of the cold outside. It was in every public room in those years, the diner and the barber shop and the waiting room and the lanes, and a child moved through it without noticing, the way you do not notice the weather of a country you've always lived in. Nearly every grown-up had a cigarette going. The chrome ashtrays were built right into the tables and the seat backs, little grooves worn smooth by countless resting cigarettes, and between frames the adults would settle back and light up and let the smoke curl while they watched the play. A man would take his turn, roll his ball, and come back to his seat and his waiting cigarette in one easy motion, the two things braided together, the bowling and the smoking, as natural as breathing. The women did it too, holding their cigarettes with a particular elegance, tapping the ash with a flick of one finger, the smoke rising past their done-up hair. Mixed in with the smoke were the other smells of the grown-up evening, and together they made a single atmosphere that a child came to know as the very smell of Friday night. There was coffee, always coffee, going dark and bitter at the snack bar and carried back to the lanes in paper cups. There was beer in the alleys that served it, that yeasty malt smell drifting from the tables where the league men sat. And under all of it, holding it together, was the clean chemical sweetness of the lane oil, that unmistakable smell you would know anywhere for the rest of your life. Smoke and coffee and beer and oil woven into one, and to you it did not smell like vice or danger. It smelled like the grown-ups being happy. It smelled like being allowed to stay up late. There was a whole atmosphere to that smoke-hazed room that belonged to the adults, and a child felt himself to be a small guest in it. This was their world, the grown-ups, laid out in the drifting haze and the clink of coffee cups and the low rumble of adult talk and laughter. You were welcome in it, warmly welcome, but you understood dimly that it was theirs, that you were being let into something, and that being let in was itself a kind of gift. You sat among them and breathed their air and listened to their talk, and you felt older for it, folded into the grown-up evening in a way that thrilled you. Of course, it is a scene no bowling alley would permit today, and rightly so. We know now what that blue haze was doing, to the grown-ups who made it, and to the children who breathed it without any say in the matter, and no one would wish those years back on that count. The ashtrays are long gone from the tables. The air in the lanes is clean now, and clean is better, and there is no real arguing the point. And yet the memory carries its own gentle ache, the way memories of a vanished world so often do, because for a child who knew no better and feared no harm, that smoke-hazed room was simply warm, and the smell of it was simply the smell of the people he loved being together and at ease. To catch a stray whiff of that particular blend now, the tobacco and coffee and something oiled, is to be dropped without warning back onto that speckled floor, small again, up past your bedtime, breathing the air of the grown-up world. There is no wishing back the smoke itself, and we are better off without it. But it is a strange and tender thing, how the memory of a place is bound up in its very air, in smells we would never permit again, and yet cannot help but miss a little. It is worth sitting for a moment with that ache, and with the small guest you once were, breathing in the whole warm, hazy atmosphere of a Friday night that has quietly moved on. Over in the corner, let us not forget the jukebox, glowing red and gold and stocked with the season's hits. A teenager feeds it a coin, and suddenly a familiar song rises up over the thunder of the lanes, and for a moment the whole room seems to move a little to it. The music is part of the atmosphere, the same handful of records everyone knows by heart, playing on into the night. Years later, hearing one of those songs will drop you straight back onto that maple floor without any warning at all. The jukebox stood in its corner like a small lit shrine, all curved chrome and glowing panels, the colours shifting slow behind the glass, red bleeding into gold into a warm amber. It hummed even when it was silent, a low electric readiness, and it drew the children the way bright glowing things always draw children. You would stand before it and press your hands to the cool glass and read the titles listed in their little slotted cards, the songs of the moment, the ones playing on every radio that year, laid out here in a row waiting for a coin to bring them to life. It was mostly the teenagers who fed it, of course, because a jukebox was teenage territory in a way the rest of the alley was not. They gathered near it in their own loose knots, the older kids, the ones who had come without their parents, and they debated the selections with the seriousness of people for whom a song choice mattered enormously. A coin went in, a button was pressed, and there was a small mechanical ceremony as the machine reached in among its stacked records, drew one out, and set the needle down. Then the song rose up, familiar from the first note, and something shifted in the room, because the music did change the room for the length of a song. It rode up over the thunder of the balls and the crack of the pins, not drowning them but joining them, weaving itself into the whole din so that the crashes seemed almost to fall on the beat. Heads nodded. A pair of teenagers by the machine swayed a little without quite dancing. A mother at the lanes hummed along under her breath as she chalked her hands. The song gave the evening a pulse it had not quite had a moment before, and everyone felt it even if no one remarked on it, the way a familiar tune can lift and gather a room full of strangers. And it was always the same handful of songs. That was part of the magic of it. The jukebox held the hits of the season, the records everyone had heard 100 times already that year, on the radio and in the diner, and drifting from open car windows all summer long. So when one came on at the lanes, the whole room knew it instantly, and knew all the words, and that shared knowing was its own quiet bond. This was the soundtrack of that particular year, playing in the background of all your Fridays, so woven into the evenings that you did not so much listen to it as live inside it. You were too young to work the machine yourself, most likely, but you loved it all the same. You loved to watch the teenagers cluster and choose. You loved the moment the record dropped, and the needle found its groove, and the first note swelled up out of the chrome. You loved to stand close and feel the machine hum through the glass under your palms. It was another of the alley's wonders, another lit and glowing thing in a building full of them, and it belonged to the atmosphere of the place as surely as the smoke and the crash of the pins. Then years pass, more years than you would believe, and one day you're somewhere else entirely. A grocery store, a passing car, a radio left on in another room, and one of those songs comes on, and it does not matter how long it has been. You are back. You're standing on that speckled floor in the smoke-hazed light with a cup of cola sweating in your hand and the pins crashing behind you, small again and up past your bedtime, the whole evening alive around you as though it never ended at all. A song can do that. It can hold a night inside it, sealed and perfect, and hand the whole thing back to you decades later in the space of a few bars. That is the strange power of the music of our youth, that it files a whole time and place away inside itself and keeps them for us, waiting. The jukebox in the corner played the season's hits into the background of 1,000 ordinary evenings, and in doing so it saved them, so that all these years later a familiar song can still drop you straight back onto the maple floor. It is worth being grateful for that, for the songs that carry our vanished nights inside them, and for the glowing machine in the corner that first set them playing. Let us shift now to Saturday morning, when the light comes in grey and the coffee at the snack bar is doing its important work. The men's league gathers early, before the day's errands and the lawn and the leaky faucet can lay their claims. They bowl with a quiet, easy focus, needling each other softly, settling small debts of pride from the week before. It was a way for working men to be together without any occasion or reason, beyond the simple pleasure of it, and there was something steadying in that. The Saturday morning alley had a different character altogether from the Friday night one, quieter, greyer, more subdued. The great crowds were not here yet. The families would come later, the birthday parties and the open bowling of the afternoon. But in these early hours the place belonged to the men, and it had the hushed, unhurried feeling of morning that has not yet been claimed by the day's demands. The light coming through the high windows was the flat grey light of early morning, and the snack bar coffee was doing its important work, cup after cup carried steaming to the lanes. These were working men, most of them, men who spent their weeks at the plant or the shop or behind a desk or out on a route, and Saturday morning was a sliver of time carved out before the weekend's obligations closed in. Because a Saturday for a family man in those years was not a day of rest, so much as a day of tasks. The lawn to be mowed, the gutter to be cleared, the leaky faucet under the sink that had been waiting all week, the errands his wife had a list of. All of that was coming, and every man there knew it. But it was coming later. First there was this, an hour or two of bowling before the day laid its claims. They bowled with an easy, practised focus, these Saturday men. There was none of the Friday night rowdiness to it, none of the crowds and the noise and the children underfoot. It was a calmer thing, men who'd been bowling together for years falling into the familiar rhythm of it, taking their turns, marking their scores, settling into the quiet companionship of a shared morning. The talk between frames was low and unhurried, the talk of men comfortable enough with one another to leave long silences unfilled. Somebody mentioned the ball game. Somebody complained mildly about work. Somebody's poor frame drew a soft ribbing, gentle and worn smooth by long use, for there was needling, of course, the way there always is among men who like each other. Small debts of pride had a way of carrying over from week to week. A bad game not quite forgotten, a bet not quite settled, a boast that needed either backing up or living down. These were paid off on Saturday morning in the currency of good throws and dry remarks, and the settling of them was half the fun. A man who had lost the week before came in wanting to even the score, and a man who had won came in ready to remind everyone of it, and the whole low-stakes rivalry rolled on from one Saturday to the next, never quite resolved, which was exactly how they all wanted it. But underneath the game and the needling was the real thing, the thing none of them would ever have named out loud. This was how working men got to be together. A man's week did not offer him much of it, the plain, unhurried company of other men, with no occasion required and nothing to be accomplished. He worked. He came home to his family. He did his tasks. There was not, in the ordinary run of things, a built-in reason simply to spend a couple of hours in the easy company of his friends. The Saturday League was that reason. It asked nothing of them but that they show up and bowl, and it gave them in return each other. There was something steadying in it, something a working man needed more than he probably knew. The week had its pressures, its demands, its long grind, and Saturday morning at the lanes was a place to set all of that down for a little while, among men who carried the same load and understood without being told. You did not have to talk about it. That was the point. You just had to be there, taking your turns, drinking your coffee, needling your friends, and letting the ordinary steadying company of it do its quiet work before you went home to the lawn and the faucet and the list. We do not always make room anymore for that kind of gathering, the standing appointment among friends that needs no reason beyond itself, and something is lost in the lack of it. The Saturday men understood a thing worth remembering, that grown people, and grown men especially, need plain, unhurried time together as much as they need anything, and that a simple game on a grey morning could give it to them faithfully, week after week. It is worth honouring the quiet steadiness of that, the coffee and the low talk and the easy company, carved out before the day could lay its claims. Walk past the trophy case with me now, that lit glass cabinet near the front doors. Inside stand rows of little golden figures frozen mid-swing, engraved with the names of champions and the years they reigned. Everyone knew the names on those trophies. The man who rolled a perfect game won unforgettable night. The women's team that took the city title 3 years running. It was a modest kind of fame, local and lasting, and to see your family name up there behind the glass was to be known in your own small corner of the world. The case stood where everyone would pass it, near the front doors, lit from within so that the gold caught the light and threw it back at you as you came and went. Behind the glass stood the trophies in their ranks, some small and some grand. The little golden bowlers frozen forever mid-swing atop their marble bases, arm drawn back, one leg extended, caught in the perfect form of a throw that would never quite be released. There were plaques too, and engraved cups, and photographs gone a little faded, the whole record of the Ali's glories gathered in one lit cabinet for anyone to stop and admire. You stopped often. Children always did. There was something about the little golden figures that held you, the shine of them, the frozen grace, the sense that each one stood for some deed worth remembering. You would press close to the glass and read the engravings, the names and the dates and the scores, and you would try to imagine the nights they commemorated, the moments of triumph that had earned a person a permanent place behind this glass. To a child, the trophies seemed to belong to a higher order of being, proof that ordinary people from your own ordinary town could rise, on some golden night, to something like greatness. And everyone knew the names. That was the thing about it. This was a small enough world that the champions were not strangers. They were neighbours, people you might see at the hardware store, or in the next pew at church, or bowling 3 lanes over on a Friday night. There was the man who had rolled a perfect game, a whole string of strikes without a single miss, on one unforgettable night that people still talked about, and his name was up there in gold to prove it happened. There was the women's team that had taken the city title 3 years running, their names engraved together, a small dynasty of mothers and wives who had been on those nights simply the best in town. It was a modest kind of fame, and that was exactly its beauty. No one on those trophies was famous in the way the movie stars were famous, known to millions, faces on magazine covers. This was fame the size of a town, local and human and lasting. The kind where the people who honoured you were the same people who knew you, who had watched you do the thing, who would tell the story of it for years. A perfect game at the corner lanes did not make the newspapers beyond your own city, but it made you a legend in the only world that had ever really been yours, and that was more than enough. It was in some ways better than the other kind, because it was real and near and shared with people who actually loved you. To have your own family name up there was a particular kind of pride. Maybe it was your father's name on a team trophy from some year before you were born, and he would point it out to you with a studied casualness that did not quite hide how much it meant to him. Maybe it was an uncle's, or a name you did not know but that your mother did, a person from the neighbourhood who had had their golden night. And you would look at that name behind the glass and feel yourself connected to it, known through it, a small part of the alley's long-remembered story. In a town, to be up on that wall was to be known, and to be known was to belong. It gave a person something to reach for too, that lit case by the door. Every child who pressed his face to the glass and read the names of the champions carried away a small private wish to be up there himself someday, to roll the game of his life on some unforgettable night and earn his own little golden figure frozen mid-swing. Most never would, of course, but the dream was free, and the case held it out to everyone who passed, the plain democratic promise that greatness, the town-sized kind, was available to anyone who showed up and bowled and caught lightning on the right night. We have fewer of those lit cases now, fewer places that gather up the modest glories of ordinary people and hold them out where everyone can see. There is something worth grieving in that. The loss of the local legend, the town-sized fame that honoured the people you actually knew. It is worth remembering the trophy case by the door, and the little golden figures frozen forever mid-swing, and the plain good pride of seeing a familiar name enshrined in gold in your own small corner of the world. Step back outside for a moment and look up at the building itself, because these were not humble places. The great bowling centres of the era wore their optimism on the outside, with soaring angled roof lines, walls of glass, and neon signs shaped like arrows and boomerangs and stars. They were built in that hopeful, forward-leaning style that seemed to promise the future was arriving any minute now. A bowling alley in 1962 could look like a spaceship that had chosen, of all places, to land beside the highway in your hometown. You would see it from a distance as you drove up, rising out of the low sprawl of the roadside, unmistakable and grand. The roofline did not sit flat and modest the way an ordinary building's did. It soared, it angled, it swept upward at the corners as though the whole structure were straining toward the sky. There were rooflines that folded like paper, peaks that jutted at bold diagonals, great cantilevered overhangs that reached out past the walls to shelter the entrance in dramatic shadow. Nothing about it was apologetic. It announced itself. It meant to be seen. And the sign, oh, the sign was the crowning glory. It rose on a tall pylon out front, high enough to be spotted from far down the highway, and it was a riot of neon in the shapes that Decade loved best. Arrows that seemed to fly, boomerangs frozen in mid-flight, starbursts and atoms and little orbiting spheres, the whole visual language of the space age rendered in glowing tubes of colour against the dark. The alley's name blazed across it in bold script, and beneath or beside it the neon shapes pulsed and chased and flickered, so that the whole thing seemed alive, seemed to be in motion even as it stood still, seemed to promise that something exciting was happening just inside. This was the style of the moment, and it had a hopefulness baked right into it. The country in those years was leaning hard into the future, into rockets and satellites and the shining promise of the atomic age, and its buildings caught the mood. The diners and the motels and the car washes and the bowling alleys all reached for that same forward-leaning optimism. All those swooping angles and glowing signs and walls of plate glass, as though the future were a place you could build your way into if you only made your rooflines bold enough. It was architecture that believed in tomorrow, that expected tomorrow to be bright, and it wore that belief right out where everyone could see. To walk towards such a building as a child was to feel that you were entering somewhere special, somewhere that mattered. The great glass walls glowed from within, spilling their light across the parking lot, so that the whole interior seemed to float there in the dark, bright and warm and full of promise. You passed under the dramatic sweep of the entrance canopy, through the gleaming doors, and you understood without anyone telling you that this was no ordinary shed for an ordinary pastime. Real thought had gone into making it grand. Real money had gone into making it beautiful. Somebody had wanted your Friday night out to feel like an occasion, and the building said so from 100 yards away. There is a particular wonder in remembering how much beauty was spent on such everyday places. This was only the bowling alley after all, only the spot where the town came to knock down pins and eat fries and see its neighbours. It did not need to soar. It did not need boomerangs in neon or walls of glass, or a roofline that reached for the sky. A plain box would have served the same games, but the age would not settle for a plain box, not for something the whole community used and loved. It built a palace instead, a gleaming, optimistic palace of the space age, and set it down beside the highway for ordinary families to enjoy on ordinary nights. Many of them are gone now, those palaces, torn down or gutted or left to fade, their neon dark, their bold rooflines sagging or demolished. Here and there one survives, a little worn, and to come upon it is to catch a glimpse of how confidently that vanished decade dreamed, how sure it was that the future would be bright, and that even a bowling alley deserved to share in the promise. We do not build our everyday places that way anymore, with that soaring, hopeful flourish, and something has gone quieter in our landscape for the lack of it. It is worth looking up in memory at those great glowing buildings and feeling again the confidence they were built with. There was a time when we believed the future was arriving any minute now, and we built even our bowling alleys to welcome it, in soaring angles and boomerang neon, palaces of ordinary joy set down beside the highway for anyone at all to walk into. It is worth remembering how beautiful we once made the plainest corners of our lives. Let us give a whole segment to the birthday party, because for a child it was an event of the highest order. The lane is reserved, the little cakes are carried out from the snack bar, and a cluster of children in party shoes takes turns heaving balls with 2 hands down the gutters and, once in a great while, into the pins. There are bumpers of pure hope and no small amount of chaos, and a grown-up patiently helping the smallest ones aim. For one afternoon the whole gleaming palace seemed to belong entirely to you. The word went out weeks ahead, and the anticipation of it could hardly be borne. A birthday party at the Lanes was the grandest thing a child of that age could imagine, far grander than a party at home, because it happened out in the world, in that bright, loud, wonderful place, with a whole lane reserved just for you and your friends. You handed out the invitations at school and watched the envy bloom on the other children's faces, and you counted down the days and the last night before it. You lay awake too excited to sleep, running the whole glorious afternoon ahead of you in your mind. Then the day came, and it was even better than the imagining. Your friends arrived in their good clothes, dropped off by their parents at the gleaming doors, and there was the whole ceremony of getting them all into their rental shoes, a great giggling operation, a pile of small, ordinary shoes traded for a pile of small two-toned ones. Somebody's shoes did not fit and had to be swapped. Somebody could not work the laces. The counterman handled the whole swarm of you with weary good humour, and then you were shod, all of you, a cluster of children in party shoes clomping toward the reserved lane that bore, impossibly, your own name up on the little sign. The bowling itself was chaos of the happiest kind. Children that age could barely lift the balls, and so they heaved them with both hands from between their knees, a graceless two-handed shove that sent the ball wobbling slowly down the lane with no particular aim at all. Most of them found the gutter, and there were groans and squeals at each one, and now and then, once in a great while, by pure luck rather than any skill, a ball would wander into the pins and knock a few flat, and the whole party would erupt as though a miracle had occurred. A patient grown-up crouched at the line, helping the very smallest ones, steadying their aim, teaching them to let go at the right moment, celebrating every wobbling roll as though it were a championship throw. And then there was the cake, carried out from the snack bar at the appointed moment, set on the little table behind the lane, candles lit against the bright fluorescent glare so that they hardly seemed to glow at all. But it did not matter. The whole party gathered round, and the song was sung, loud and off-key and wonderful, rising up over the crash of the pins from the neighbouring lanes. And you closed your eyes over the flickering candles with the whole loud bright palace of the bowling alley wrapped around you and your friends all leaning in, and you made your wish, and you blew, and everyone cheered. There has never been a cake, before or since, that tasted quite so good as that one. What made it so complete, so perfect, was the feeling that for this one golden afternoon the whole place belonged to you. It was not true, of course. There were other lanes going, other families, the ordinary crowd of a weekend afternoon. But it did not feel that way. It felt as though the great gleaming palace, the wonderful loud bright building you loved above all others, had opened its doors and reserved itself entirely for your birthday, that all its wonders, the pins and the machines and the snack bar and the jukebox, were arranged that day around you. A child's world is small, and on your birthday, at the lanes, that small world was filled to its very edges with joy. Your friends went home clutching their party favours, and you rode home yourself in the back of the wagon, tired and sticky and utterly happy, replaying the whole afternoon, the shoes and the wobbling balls and the gutters and the cake and the one glorious moment you had actually knocked down a pin or two. It was the best day. You were sure of it. Nothing could ever be better than a birthday at the lanes, and for a child of that age, in that place, in that time, nothing was. There is a purity to a child's happiness that we spend the rest of our lives trying to find our way back to, and a birthday at the lanes distilled it as well as anything ever did. It is worth remembering how completely a reserved lane and a carried-out cake and a cluster of friends in party shoes could fill a child's whole world with joy. How little it took, really, to make a small person feel that the entire gleaming palace had gathered itself around them for one perfect afternoon. It is worth sitting a while with that pure and simple gladness, and honouring it. Now let the hour grow later, and watch the teenagers arrive. For them the bowling alley was neutral ground, well lit and full of people, a place a nervous boy could take a girl on a first date without either family objecting. They bowled badly and laughed about it, shared a basket of fries, lingered by the jukebox longer than the game required. It was courtship conducted under fluorescent lights and the crash of pins, awkward and sweet, and for many couples it was where the whole story quietly began. As the evening deepened and the families with young children began to gather up their coats and head for home, the character of the place shifted again. The teenagers came into their own now, arriving in twos and small groups, dropped off out front or, for the older ones, pulling into the lot in a borrowed car. They had a different energy about them, self-conscious and electric, all of them keenly aware of who else was there, whose eyes were on them, how they looked crossing the floor in their good clothes. The lanes after dark belonged in part to them, and they knew it, and they moved through the place with the particular charged awareness of the young. For a boy working up the nerve to ask a girl out, the bowling alley was a gift, a nearly perfect answer to an impossible problem. It was bright, which reassured her parents. It was public, full of neighbours and families, so nothing could happen that the whole town would not know about, which reassured them further. And it was cheap, which mattered a great deal to a boy with only a little money in his pocket. He could ask a girl to go bowling and both sets of parents would nod their approval, and so the lanes became the great proving ground of young courtship, the place where 1,000 nervous first dates played themselves out under the safe and steady fluorescent light. And they bowled badly, most of them, and that was the mercy of it. Neither one of them was there to bowl, not really. The game was only a frame to hang the evening on, something to do with your hands and your eyes so you did not have to sit staring at each other in a terrifying silence. A gutter ball was a blessing, because it gave you both something to laugh about, and laughter loosened the awful tightness of a first date better than anything. He would show her how to hold the ball, an excuse to stand close. She would tease him about his own poor throw. The bad bowling did the work that neither of them could have done directly, thawing the nervousness into something like ease. They shared a basket of fries between them, from the snack bar, and there was a small intimacy in that too, in reaching for the same food, in the accidental brush of hands over the paper boat. They drank their colas and talked in the halting, searching way of the young, just starting to know each other, finding the subjects that lit them both up, discovering with a jolt each thing they had in common. And they lingered by the jukebox far longer than choosing a song required, because it was a place to stand close and talk with their heads bent together over the glowing glass, half in the music and half in each other. It was awkward, and it was sweet, and it was exactly what young love is supposed to be, tentative and hopeful and slightly ridiculous, conducted under harsh bright lights in a loud and public room. There was nothing polished about it, no candlelit sophistication, just two young people and a game they were both bad at and a basket of fries and a jukebox and the enormous thrilling terror of liking someone and hoping they liked you back. The crash of the pins carried on all around them, indifferent, while the small momentous drama of a first date unfolded quietly in their corner of the lanes. And for so many couples that was where it began. The whole long story of a life together, the marriage and the house and the children and the decades, all of it traced back, if you followed it far enough, to one nervous night at the bowling alley, to a shared basket of fries and a laughed-over gutter ball, and a lingering conversation by the jukebox. They would tell it to their children later, and their grandchildren, that this was where they met, or where he first asked her, or where they first knew. The lanes had been the humble, glowing, fluorescent cradle of it all. There is a real tenderness in remembering the places where love got its awkward start, the plain public rooms that gave the young a safe and easy way to find each other. The bowling alley did that work faithfully for a whole generation, asking nothing but a little money and offering in return a bright, forgiving, neighbourly place to fall in love. It is worth honouring that the sweetness of a first date under the fluorescent lights, and the countless long stories that quietly began over a shared basket of fries and a badly bowled game. Let us step home for a moment to the living room, where bowling had found its way onto the television. On a weekend afternoon, the family gathered around the set to watch the professionals roll for real money. The hushed announcer, the slow-motion strikes, the tension of a single final frame. It made the game feel important, connected your little local lanes to a larger world of true champions, and it sent you back the next Friday determined to roll just like the men on the screen, even if your ball still drifted stubbornly toward the gutter. The television sat in the living room like an altar in those years, a heavy wooden cabinet with the screen that glowed grey and silver, and the family arranged itself around it for the weekend afternoon programs. And bowling was there, right there among them, a real and regular part of what the networks offered. The professional bowlers rolling their games for prize money before the cameras, while announcers described the action in the hushed, reverent tones usually reserved for golf. You would settle onto the floor in front of the set, or into your father's lap, and watch the great men of the sport do what you tried to do every Friday, only immeasurably better. There was a particular hush to the way it was broadcast, a quiet that matched the quiet of the announcers' voices. The camera watched the bowler at the top of his approach, and everything went still, and the announcer murmured low, as though a loud word might spoil the throw. Then the bowler moved, that smooth practiced approach, that fluid swing, and the ball left his hand and rolled true down the lane, and the camera followed it all the way, and sometimes, gloriously, the network showed it again in slow motion, the ball drifting into the pocket and the pins bursting apart one frozen instant at a time. To a child who bowled, this was mesmerizing. The very thing you did rendered slow and huge and beautiful on the screen, and it made the game feel important in a way that thrilled you. Here was proof that bowling was not just a thing your family did on Friday nights, not just a local pastime for the corner lanes, but a real sport, a serious sport, with champions and prize money and cameras and announcers, watched by people all across the country. The professionals rolled for real stakes, and the tension of it was genuine, a whole tournament sometimes coming down to a single final frame, one last throw with the money and the title riding on it. You held your breath along with the announcer. You felt the weight of that final ball as though your own hand were about to release it. What it did, more than anything, was connect your small world to a larger one. Your own lanes, your own borrowed ball, your own wobbling throws suddenly belonged to something vast, a national game with heroes at the top of it. The men on the screen had started somewhere. You understood dimly, at some local lanes of their own, rolling their first clumsy childhood throws just as you were rolling yours. And the same game ran unbroken from your Friday nights all the way up to the championship on the television, one continuous thing, so that in some small way you were part of it too, a beginner at the very bottom of a ladder whose top reached all the way to the glowing screen. So you watched, and you learned, or you thought you did. You studied the professional's form, the smooth four-step approach, the pendulum swing, the way the ball rolled off their fingers with that expert spin that made it curve into the pocket. You told yourself you understood it now, that you could do it, that next Friday you would roll just like the men on the screen, and then next Friday came, and you stood at the top of your own approach, full of the confidence the television had given you, and you took your 4 steps and made your swing and let the ball go, and it drifted stubborn as ever toward the gutter. But it did not matter, not really. Because the dream was the good part, the believing that you might someday roll like that, the connection to a larger world of champions that made your own small game feel to be part of something grand. The television had given you that, a glimpse of the heights, a hero to imitate, a reason to try, and you would carry it back to the lanes every week, the image of those slow-motion strikes, and you would keep reaching for it, gutter ball after gutter ball, happy in the reaching. There is something sweet in how the game reached into the living room in those years and made itself feel important, how it connected a child's wobbling Friday night throws to a whole national world of champions. It is worth remembering the hush of those broadcasts, the slow-motion strikes, the single tense final frame, and the way they sent a child back to the lanes each week dreaming of rolling like the men on the screen, even as the ball drifted faithfully, stubbornly toward the gutter. Consider now what the place truly was beneath the game itself. The bowling alley was, for a great many towns, the closest thing to a shared living room the whole community had. It was where you ran into your teacher and your barber and the family from 2 streets over, where news travelled and friendships were kept up and belonging was made ordinary and easy. There was no membership required beyond showing up, and in a decade that prized togetherness, that open, welcoming warmth was worth more than anyone stopped to measure. Strip away the pins and the lanes and the machines, and what you were left with was simply a room where the whole town came together, a great warm public parlour open to anyone who walked through the doors. That was the deeper truth of the place, the thing it did that had nothing much to do with knocking down pins. It gathered people. Night after night it drew them in out of their separate houses and their separate lives, and set them all down together under one bright roof, and in doing so it knit a community together in a way that happened almost without anyone's noticing. You ran into everyone there. That was the wonder of it. There was your school teacher, seen startlingly out of context, laughing with friends over a cup of coffee, a whole person suddenly, with a life beyond the classroom. There was your barber, bowling 3 lanes down. There was the family from 2 streets over, the ones you knew by sight but had never quite spoken to. And here, in the easy sociability of the lanes, a conversation started, and a nodding acquaintance became a friendship. The place threw people together who might otherwise have passed their whole lives as strangers, and it did it gently, casually, without anyone having to make an effort. And the news of the town travelled there, the way news travels wherever people gather. Who was getting married, and who was expecting, who had taken ill, and who had gotten the new job, whose boy had made the team and whose family was moving away. It passed from lane to lane, table to table, in the ordinary talk between frames, and by the end of an evening you went home knowing the state of your whole small world, updated and current, gathered up in the natural course of a night out. The bowling alley was the town's newspaper, and its bulletin board, and its front porch all at once, the place where a community told itself the ongoing story of itself. Friendships were kept up there too, the way friendships need to be, by regular ordinary contact over long stretches of time. You did not have to arrange anything, did not have to make a plan or send an invitation. You simply went to the lanes, the way you always did, and the people you knew were there, the way they always were, and the friendship carried on, tended and watered by the simple fact of turning up in the same warm room week after week. So much of what holds people together is just that. Presence, reliable presence, and the bowling alley supplied it in abundance, a standing occasion to be among your people without anyone having to work at it. And the beauty of it, the real democratic beauty, was that it asked nothing of you to belong. There was no membership, no dues, no gate to pass, no one to decide whether you were the right sort. You simply showed up and rented your shoes and you were in, folded into the whole warm gathering as easily as anyone else. The banker and the mechanic bowled in the same room, the old and the young, the well-off and the just getting by. All of them under the same roof, all of them welcome on the same easy terms. Belonging there was not something you earned or bought. It was simply extended freely to anyone who walked through the doors. That decade prized togetherness, believed in it, built its whole life around the family and the neighborhood and the community, and the bowling alley was one of the great engines of that togetherness, humming away night after night, gathering people in. No one thought to measure what it was worth, this open, welcoming warmth, because it was simply there, taken for granted as ordinary as the air. Only later, when so many of these gathering places had gone quiet or gone away, would people begin to understand what they had had and what it had given them, and how much of a community's life had flowed through those bright, loud rooms. We have grown lonelier since, in ways we do not always name, as the shared living rooms of our towns have closed one by one, and our lives have drawn back into our separate houses and our separate screens. It is worth remembering what the bowling alley truly was. Beneath the game, a great warm parlour open to all, where you ran into everyone and belonged without trying, and the whole community came quietly together. It is worth sitting with that, and with the ordinary, unmeasured, welcoming warmth of a place that simply gathered people in. Let us pause on a quiet changing of the guard. Not so many years before, behind every lane crouched a pin boy, a teenager, or a young man who set the pins by hand and cleared the fallen ones fast and unseen for a few coins a game. The automatic pinsetter had made that job vanish nearly overnight, and with it a whole rung of first work for young men. It was progress, and no one much mourned the danger of the old way. And yet there is a small tenderness in remembering those boys who once worked in the shadows at the far end of the maple. Picture the old way before the machines came. Behind each lane, up on a narrow ledge above the pit where the balls and pins came crashing, sat a boy, waiting. He kept himself clear while the ball did its work, and then, the moment the pins had fallen and the ball had spent itself against the back cushion, he dropped down into the pit and went to work. He gathered the fallen pins quick as he could and set them back in their spots by hand, 10 of them in their perfect triangle, and he sent the ball rolling back up the return, and then he hauled himself up out of the way before the next thundering ball arrived. He did this all night, lane after lane sometimes, throw after throw in the noise and the flying wood and the half-dark. It was hard work and it was dangerous. A pin could come flying off a hard strike and catch a boy in the shin, the arm, the head, and there was nothing to do but learn to be quick and stay alert and take the knocks as they came. The pay was small, a few coins a game, tips if the bowlers were feeling generous, and the hours were late, stretching deep into the evening while the leagues rolled on. But for a certain kind of boy it was a first job, a way to earn his own money, a rung to stand on, and plenty of young men had passed through that pit on their way to growing up, learning the value of $1 in the hardest and most literal way. Then the automatic pinsetter came, and the whole arrangement vanished almost between one season and the next. The machine did everything the pin boy had done, and did it faster, and did it without ever needing to be paid or growing tired or risking a pin to the shin. An alley that installed the machines had no more need of boys in the pit, and so the boys were let go, not out of any cruelty but simply because the work they had done no longer existed. A job that had been a fixture of the sport, a first job for countless young men, was there 1 year and gone the next, swept away as cleanly as the machine swept away the fallen pins. and no one much mourned it in the main, and it is hard to argue that they should have. The old way was dangerous and low-paid and hard, and there is nothing noble in wishing bruised shins and flying pins back onto anyone's teenage sons. The machine was better, plainly better, safer and faster, and the thing that made the whole grand era of family bowling possible. To grieve the loss of the pinboy's job would be a kind of sentimentality that ignores what the job actually was. Cold and dark and dangerous work done for pennies at the far end of the lane. And yet, there is a small tenderness that catches you anyway, remembering those boys, because it was not only a hard job, it was also a place in the world for a young man who needed one, a way to be useful and to earn and to belong, and when the machines came, that place simply closed, and the young men who might have filled it had to find their footing somewhere else. Every advance carries a small cost like that, tucked away out of sight, a door quietly shutting somewhere even as a brighter one opens. The pinboys are a piece of that cost, a rung of the ladder that was there for generations and then was gone. It is strange to feel affection for a job nobody would want back, but that is often how it goes with the vanished work of the past. You do not wish the danger back, or the low pay, or the late cold hours in the pit. You only feel, looking at the tireless machine doing its clean and patient work, a quiet awareness that boys once crouched there in the shadows, real boys with names and lives, doing by hand what the metal arm now does, and that they were part of this place too, part of its story, before the future arrived and gently set them aside. There is a grace in remembering them, the last of the pinboys, working unseen at the far end of the maple in the years just before the machines. Progress is real, and mostly it is good, and still it is worth pausing now and then over the small human costs it carries so lightly, over the doors it quietly closes even as it opens the bright wide others. It is worth a moment's tenderness for the boys in the shadows, who set the pins by hand for a few coins a game, and whose vanished work helped carry us toward all those good bright nights that followed. Think now of the friendships this place quietly sustained. Grown men and women are not always given easy ways to stay close as the years pile up and life fills with obligation. But the League gave them a reason, a standing weekly promise that put the same faces beside each other, season after season, decade after decade. Rivalries softened into fondness, and teammates became the sort of friends who showed up when it mattered. Some of the deepest bonds of a person's whole life were built 10 pins at a time. It is one of the quiet difficulties of growing up, though no one warns you of it in advance, how hard it becomes to keep your friendships alive once life fills in around you. As a child, friendship is effortless, a matter of proximity. The children next door and the children at school, seen every day without any arranging. But then you grow, and you marry, and you work, and you raise your own children, and the days fill up with obligation until there is scarcely a gap left in them, and your friends, once so close, drift to the edges of your life, seen at holidays if at all, remembered fondly, but no longer really known. It happens to nearly everyone, this slow quiet loosening, and most people simply accept it as the price of a full-grown life. The League stood against that drift. That was its quiet gift, the thing it did that had nothing to do with pins or scores. It gave grown people a reason to stay close, a standing weekly appointment written right into the calendar of their lives, and it held that appointment firm against all the obligations that would otherwise have crowded it out. You did not have to arrange to see your friends. You did not have to hope a gap would open in the busy weeks. The League simply put you in the same room with the same faces on the same night, faithfully, whether or not you would have gotten around to it on your own, and in doing so it kept alive friendships that the ordinary press of life would have quietly let go. And it did this not for a season, but for years, for decades sometimes, the same team on the same night, rolling on and on through the changing years of their lives. They bowled together through their young marriages and the raising of their children and the settling into middle age and beyond. The same faithful weekly gathering carrying steadily on beneath all the great slow changes of their lives. Season after season the standings reset and the games began again, and the same people took their same places, a little older each year, and the continuity of it was its own deep comfort, a fixed and reliable thing in a world where so much else kept shifting. Over that long span, the friendships deepened in the way only long-tended friendships can. The rivalries of the early years, the needling and the boasting and the small competitive edge, softened over time into pure fondness, the affectionate ribbing of people who had been beside each other so long they had become a kind of family. Teammates who had started as near strangers, thrown together by the luck of the league, became over the years the friends who knew you best, who had watched your children grow up alongside their own, who had been there through the whole long unfolding of your adult life. The bowling was only ever the frame. The friendship was the picture inside it, growing richer year by year. And when it mattered, those were the friends who came. That was the truest measure of what the league had built. When illness came, or loss, or hard times, when a person needed help or comfort, or simply someone to stand beside them, it was often the bowling friends who showed up. The teammates of 20 years, the faces from the Tuesday night lanes. What had begun as a casual weekly game had, over the long haul, become one of the load-bearing relationships of a person's life, and it revealed itself as such in the moments when it counted, when the pins and the scores fell away and only the human bond remained. Some of the deepest friendships a person ever formed were built exactly this way, slowly, almost accidentally, 10 pins at a time, over years of faithful Tuesday nights. Not forged in some dramatic crucible, not sworn in youth, and carried on through grand adventures, but simply grown, patiently, out of the humble soil of a standing weekly game, until one day a person looked up and realized that these people, these bowling friends, were among the truest they had. It is a beautiful thing that so much closeness could come from so ordinary a source, that a game could be the quiet keeper of a friendship for the better part of a lifetime. We're not always good now at giving ourselves those standing appointments, the faithful weekly gatherings that hold our friendships against the drift of busy years, and our friendships suffer for it, loosening and fading the way they always threaten to, unheld by any regular occasion. It is worth remembering what the League understood, that grown people need a reason and a rhythm to stay close, and that a simple game on a set night can keep a friendship alive for decades. It is worth honouring the deep bonds that were built, so quietly and so well, one frame at a time. And so we come to the end of the night, the lights of the alley behind us now, the sound of the pins fading gently into memory. We walk through a whole world tonight, you and I, the family station wagon in the blue evening, the wall of light and sound, the borrowed shoes and the swirled ball chosen with such care, the crash of the pins and the tireless machine, the fries eaten with sticky happy fingers, the mothers laughing louder than they did at home, the sleepy carried-in drive back through the dark. It was a small world, and an ordinary one, and it held more warmth than we always remember to notice. Think for a moment about the people who lived it. They did not know they were living in a cherished age. They were just going bowling on a Friday night, just keeping a standing appointment with their neighbours, just showing up week after faithful week, in the same bright room with the same familiar faces, and in the plain, unremarkable act of showing up, they held something together, a community, a friendship, a family, tended quietly one frame at a time. There was a real dignity in that, in the ordinary care they took with one another, though none of them would ever have called it that. Maybe you can carry a small piece of it forward. Not the neon or the smoke, but the simple thing underneath, the choosing to be present in a warm room among your people with no agenda but each other's company. It costs so little and it gives so much. So tonight, as you settle deeper and your eyes grow heavy, let the crash of the pins fade to nothing, and let the warmth of that bright gathered place stay with you. You are safe, and you are here, and that has always been enough. Good night.